I really like the Retrotech future cassette aesthetic, and for the longest time I wondered, is there anything similar to that, but still usable and most importantly, actually useful today? Spoiler, there is. Not only that, but it's actually affordable and quite cool. I know what you're thinking. Wait, but this is not one of these videos where you are being told, just spend 5k on a tape drive, bro. Today we'll talk about tape storage. Why is there such a price hike starting with LTO 5? Discuss SCSI, SAS or fiber channel interfaces, and save my copy of Cyberpunk to a tape. But first, I need to build a server. My goal is to build a server that could be easily installed in a rack and have a tape drive in it. So, I started scavenging for old, deprecated server cases. I managed to get one that initially looked perfect. It turned out to be nowhere near that, but more on that later. The support screws didn't match ATX mobile standard, so I got as many of them matching as I could. In my previous attempt at that, back when I built the Ceph storage server, base screws were much more terribly placed. I removed the DVD drive, inserted the tape drive and... shit. The drive is full length and the PSU enclosure is in the way, for what seems to be literally no reason. And by full length I mean that, the drive has this extra space occupied while this drive is, a bit shorter. That really hit me like a truck, because I realized that as a proof of concept it's fine, but I really will want to look for another server case next time. Having said that, I inserted my SCSI card, connected it to a drive and fired the whole thing up. As always, I went with Debian. Now it's a good time to mention two very important things. I emphasized the server case because that's something that gave me the most grief. But what I really should have started with is the generation of my drive. It is an LTO1 with SCSI interface. I'll cover the details in a minute, but for now, let's write some data. I got my dedicated tape ready. The process of making it look nice involved spray paint and some 3D printing. Truth to be told, preparing the cassette took me almost 3 days, but I really like the idea of giving it some flair. LTO supports saving data on a stream, without knowing a thing about files, file systems, and so on. That means your best bet is to start writing a tar archive at the very beginning of it that includes all of your files. It's way simpler than it sounds. I've downloaded all of the installer files from gog.com and saved them in my cpunk directory. Now, I will ask tar to make an archive out of it and pass the output to DD, which saves everything on the tape. Easy. If you are at least 19's kid, first of all, go see a doctor, but secondly, you probably remember VHS tapes or tape cassettes. Tape-based data storage has been with us for a very long time, and while VHS and Walkmans have died out, this is still one of the best and most reliable ways to save data long term. Why? Well, for starters, it's quite cheap. It's just a magnetic tape on a spool after all, but it is also cheap in terms of long-term power consumption. Secondly, it has high data density. The latest LTO 9 format boasts being capable of holding 18 TB of uncompressed data, with up to 45 TB when compressed. Depending on the profile of your data, you can pack quite a lot. But isn't presenting compressed capacity weird? Tape drives have built-in hardware which tries to compress your data transparently on the fly. Try is the keyword here, because you cannot cheat entropy. Even older standards are advertised as able to compress your data with at least 2:1 ratio. But if you have already highly compressed data, such as movies, JPEG photos or just zip archives, you'll be flying much closer to the lower capacity number. And sadly, that was exactly the thing that happened in my case. The Cyberpunk installer takes up around 105 GB. The files were already pretty well compressed, so neither compression built into the tape nor gzip spared me this last few extra gigabytes. Let this be a cautionary tale for you, my viewer, that entropy cannot be cheated. However, I will not let this precious tape go to waste. I'll just make a second one, label them part 1 and 2 and make use of them that way. When buying a tape drive, you can come across various types of interfaces. The oldest ones will probably have only SCSI, but newer generations can have either SAS, Fiber Channel or even Thunderbolt. As far as I know, there are no SATA LTO drives. Funny enough, it's the old Grandpa SCSI that gave me the least amount of headache. I dabbled a bit with FC and SCSI drives, and let's just say you can connect SCSI drive directly to your SCSI adapter, whereas FC can be a bit tricky when it comes to point-to-point connections. In short, you need a fiber channel switch to form a fabric, and the whole subject is a bit complicated, so for now I'll leave it at that. That's a good moment to mention my SCSI card. Truth to be told, I didn't expect to find a working HBA for SCSI in 2024 that's PCI Express compatible, but here it is. LSI 20320IE. I bought mine brand new for a bit more than that, but it's serving me well without any complications. Just plug and play under Linux. Let's say I got you interested and now you also want to have your own tape drive and cool tapes at your home lab. There are a few options and things to be aware of. First of all, I'm assuming you are on a budget, so your best bet is to scan your local Craigslist, eBay or whatever for used LTO 1, 2, 3 or 4 drives. They can come around pretty cheap at this point. I bought mine for around $40 and from what I've seen LTO 1 to 3 are in the similar price range. Tapes can also be cheaply acquired. Even for old LTOs you can get them brand new and unopened for almost pennies. That's how I got mine anyway. Typically, for older LTO standards, you can read tapes 2 generations back, so even if you buy a newer drive along the way, you can still read your data from the older cassettes. But why do prices skyrocket starting with LTO 5? Well, that's just my take on it, but I think the answer is pretty simple. They start supporting LTFS starting from LTO 5. With it, you can format the tape and mount it as a simple directory. From there, you can use it almost as if you plugged in an USB. It's just more convenient and easier. I do have an LTO 5 drive and whole LTO 5 tape library available, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see more of it. There are some things to be aware of, and take them with a grain of salt. I haven't had that much experience with LTO, and it's just something I heard from colleagues over a beer or 2. Or 5. Anyway, supposedly if you buy a worn out tape drive, it may come to a situation some of you remember back from the CD-DVD burning era. Only the drive that wrote the tape can read it. If any of you have had the displeasure of confirming this, I would love to hear more either in the comments or just hit me up on the Discord. The link to the Discord is in the video description. One other thing is, don't be stupid. I burned my LTO 3 drive by not checking whether the modular Molex cable matched my power adapter. It turned out that the 5V wire was switched with the 12V one, and the tape got fried instantly. I grabbed a multimeter and hoped that it only fried a fuse or a resistor, but sadly my diagnosis was that the overcharge reached the chip, which I couldn't even find the datasheet for. Is saving data onto old tapes using worn out tape drives a good idea? Well, this always depends on how much you value your data. I definitely think this is a very cool thing to have, and if done with care you can add extra flair to. By care I mean that while painting this you need to be extra sure so that you will not paint over the tape available inside of it, so you need to be extra sure that you are just not spraying the paint directly into the drive, because that way you can damage the tape. I would recommend, if you really want to do this, painting your tape beforehand, writing the data and then verifying that what you wrote has matching checksum. And I do think that this cyberpunk tape turned out pretty nice, even if it didn't fit on an LTO 1. Guess I need to take out my LTO 5, but that's a story for another time.